Hello friends and welcome to Monster Monday, the Dragon series. Today I'm going to be talking about this guy, the Blue Dragon. Okay guys, the Blue Dragon is one of those dragons that is clever, diabolical, but narcissistic above perhaps other dragons, more so than other dragons. A dragon that is driven by its ego, by its feeling of superiority and power, and by its lust for subservience. I think that the cool thing about the Blue Dragon is that even though it's typically relegated to like deserts and dry steppes and even like rocky coastal areas, you could come up with reasons to have this Blue Dragon expand beyond its normal habitat if you needed to. But let's dig in a little bit. So as with 5th edition, the Monster Manual has the 4 basic age categories for the dragons. And the Wormling, even the smallest one, is still a pretty fearsome foe. So they have a flight speed, but they can also burrow at 15 feet. And I think that the burrow component here harkens back to the desert setting. I mean, you can imagine, you know, a blue dragon basically being camouflaged, like, you know, burrowing into the sand and just taking a nap in the warm, hot, burning hot sand, and then jumping out and surprising a group of travelers. But even the Wormling has an AC of 17, hit points of 8d8 plus 16, which is crazy. Of course, their breath weapon is lightning, so they are immune to lightning attacks. And the Wormling has a bite plus 5 to hit, 1d10 plus 3 damage, plus 1d6 lightning damage, and they have lightning breath that recharges on a 5 or 6. The Wormling can exhale lightning in a 30-foot line that is 5 feet wide. Each creature in that line must make a DC 12 dex save, or take 4d10 lightning damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. And that's considered a challenge rating of 3. And that's just the baby Wormling. And it gets better with each age group. The numbers go up, obviously hit points, their speed, their attacks. The young Blue Dragon has the bite attack, the claw attack, and a lightning breath. The lightning breath jump from the Wormling to the young Blue Dragon is significant because it doubles the range. So it goes from a 30-foot line to a 60-foot line, but still 5 feet wide. It's also 10d10 damage, which is significantly more. The adult Blue Dragon is even more scary. These guys have legendary resistance 3 times a day, so if they fail a saving throw, they just choose not to fail, which is, you know, crazy powerful. That's why they're challenge rating 16. Bite attacks, claw attacks, tail attacks, frightful presence, as with all of the larger dragons. They all have these kind of more intimidating components too. Lightning breath that recharges on a 5 or 6, but this time it's a 90-foot line that's 5 feet wide with a DC 19 to save and 12d10 lightning damage. And then they have legendary actions. They can detect, like this is just things that they can do every round. They can detect things. They can do a tail attack. They can do a wing attack. The wing attack's kind of cool. They beat their wings. Each creature within 10 feet of the dragon must succeed on a DC 20 dex save or take 2d6 plus 7 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. The dragon can then fly up to half its flying speed. So almost as an evasive maneuver, rather than be caught or killed, a blue dragon, as if that much death-dealing power wasn't enough, could flap its wings, knock people down, and then get out of there, which is, you know, kind of cool. But then we get to the big daddy, the ancient blue dragon. This is a gargantuan dragon with 22 AC, 26 D20, plus 208 hit points. So the average that they have here in the book is 481 hit points, which I think is kind of low on that spectrum. But they have just crazy powers. Legendary resistance 3 times a day, stupid levels of multi-attack with bite, claw, tail, frightful presence, and lightning breath with a 120-foot line that's 10 feet wide. The DC to save against that lightning breath is 23 on a dex save, and you take 16 D10 lightning damage. Challenge rating 23. So I guess if you're going after an ancient blue dragon, how do you even roll that into an adventure? We'll get to that, because that's what I like to think about. And then just so you know, they also have that detect, tail attack, and wing attack. So let's talk about what these guys are, what motivates them. So like I said, they kind of live in desert areas, dry steppes, rocky coastal areas. They tend to pick on people who are moving through their areas, trade caravans, that kind of stuff. But I think what makes the blue dragon really cool is their vanity. And I think it gives them a little more character. So rather than just having this flying, assault jet of lightning doom, think of this dragon as like a narcissist, right? Who's motivated by flattery, who's motivated by being like worshipped and praised and having minions, who is very cautious about their lair and their hoard, because treasure is an accumulation also of not just their wealth, but kind of like of their glory and greatness, right? And in the monster manual, they actually give some decent ideas about how to pair other people and other creatures with a blue dragon. So, you could think of this at almost any age group. But, let's say just suppose that you have, a young blue dragon who's kind of new to its area and is trying to stake its claim. It's a narcissist. It has something to prove to itself and to other people. It wants recognition as being a deadly foe, and it's willing to prove itself. It might even take risks that an older dragon wouldn't risk. So in a way, even though a young dragon isn't as deadly by the book as an adult or an ancient dragon, that young dragon might have something to prove, just because of that whole ego component. And maybe that young dragon is willing to make allies with certain other people who want to have the alliance of a powerful dragon at their beck and call, who are willing to cater to the dragon's ego, right? So I like to think of this in terms of a simple, basic adventure arc, right? So the party has been hired to escort a caravan of spices through this patch of desert to this oasis city, and they will be paid handsomely for it. And along the way, they encounter a bunch of different simple things and maybe dangerous things too. Maybe this is a lower level thing, so you scale things down. Maybe it's mid-level, you scale it up a little. Maybe it's high level, you scale it up, right? You've got different dragon types. If it's a low level thing, you can make this a wormling or a couple wormlings. If it's mid-level, you can make it a younger dragon. But it's not just the dragon itself, right? It's who the dragon has as minions. So you could very easily take some of this information, and I'm going to read to you from page 92. Overlords and minions. Blue dragons covet valuable and talented creatures whose service reinforces their sense of superiority. Bards, sages, artists, wizards, and assassins can become valuable agents for a blue dragon, which rewards loyal service handsomely. A blue dragon keeps its lair secret and well protected, and even its most trusted servants are rarely allowed within. It encourages ankags, giant scorpions, and other creatures of the desert to dwell near its lair for additional security. Older blue dragons sometimes attract air elementals and other creatures to serve them. Hoarders of gems. Then it talks about how they kind of love these things, how they bury their most valuable treasures in sand, which goes back again to the fact that they can burrow. And then there's a whole bunch of information on the dragon's lair. But let's rewind for a second. In this adventure arc, suppose that you have this, pretty, what I would consider standard setup, right? Escort the trade goods from one place to another. Along the way, you can encounter NPCs who are not bandits, who are not trying to rip off the caravan, who are maybe just other travelers through the desert, or maybe like nomadic folk who live in the desert and move around and warn the caravan and warn the party about this dangerous young dragon. And that kind of warning can plant the seed for potential adventures. And then suppose for a minute that, midway through the desert, night falls, the caravan makes a camp, and that is the first time that the party gets wind of the potential threat of this dragon. And maybe it comes in the form of minions initially. Maybe an Ankheg emerges and attacks. Or maybe some other, kind of scurvy, sort of like desert-dwelling humanoids who serve the blue dragon go and scout out the camp with no intent to attack, but just to scout it out and report back to their blue dragon master in the hopes that he will reward them for this information. And maybe the party is smart enough to have somebody set up on watch, and they see these, whatever, kobolds, goblins, humans, doesn't really matter what they are, these minions, and they follow them back rather than just engage in combat. But there are a lot of ways where you can kind of reveal gradually that there are people working for this sinister entity without even identifying the dragon initially. And you could have multiple encounters along this week-long journey, daytime encounters, nighttime encounters. And ultimately, when you want that story arc to hit kind of a climactic moment, you have the young blue dragon come and attack the caravan. Maybe the party is happy just getting the caravan to its location. And they avoid combat. They do enough to fend the dragon off. The dragon flies away, and then they make it to the oasis. Now, when you and your party might think that adventure storyline didn't work out because they didn't kill the dragon, that's where you have to start thinking deeper. And this is what I would do, for example. I would take that and say, okay, that dragon is still living there. That's still happening. Even though the party's moved on, they've made it to this oasis city. They successfully escorted the caravan. Maybe a few lives were lost along the way, whatever. They get paid, and they're looking for their next adventure. That's when you bring in somebody who used to serve the blue dragon, right? And who basically got burned by the blue dragon and got cut out of some treasure that he was due or she was due for. And this person, they decided that they are going to get a group of people together to find the lair of the blue dragon. And this person's not an idiot. They're strategic. They don't want to go into the lair and have to deal with the dragon while the dragon's in the lair. So they want to recruit this party of people to help them, number one, to create a distraction, to lure the dragon out of its lair so that they can then raid the lair and take all these gems. And maybe this person has a map, and he doesn't know exactly where the lair is, but based on years of kind of working for the dragon and following, he's sort of narrowed it down. He's triangulated a rough approximation of this rocky, craggy area out in the desert where he thinks the dragon's lair is. So that first encounter earlier with the dragon can return later in a campaign. And you could extend this in a timeline however you want. You could start the first encounter off where the party's doing a low-level escort the spice caravan to the oasis thing. They encounter a wormling who just, foolishly attacks, and they don't kill it, it flies away, right? And they're like, all right, whew, we should have killed that wormling, but whatever, it's not bothering us anymore. And then way later, I'm talking years later, you could bring that same wormling back through myths and legends in your storyline, people whispering about a young blue dragon that's been, taking a lot of risks and doing raids and actually going into towns sometimes for things, and that this dragon's developing a following of people who are jealous and lustful for treasure and are willing to do anything to serve it. And that could be that same baby wormling dragon that your party encountered at low level, and now they're hearing about it mid-level, and maybe that's when you introduce the disgruntled former employee of the blue dragon who wants to find the lair and all that stuff. So I think that same concept from low to mid-level, from a wormling to a young blue, could be done from mid to high with an adult blue. And then if you're just, if your party's at 15 through 20 level and they're that upper, top tier of power and you're just wondering what you can do, you can bring that same dragon back. Now let's say that they killed the dragon. Let's say that you run a few adventures with this recurring NPC who is your blue dragon as it gets older, as your party gets older, and they actually kill it. Okay, guess what? Here's an easy trope that you can borrow on. You want to go after them when they're higher level, you have that blue dragon's father or mother, whatever. You have the ancient blue dragon that spawned their enemy. That blue dragon comes calling because your party killed its offspring. And maybe that becomes even a larger, more epic thing. All right, so those are just a few ideas about how you could do simple encounters and then adventures, and then maybe even tie this into an ongoing or recurring element throughout a campaign. But I want to flip the script before I'm done. You might know that I'm not real big on alignment, right? So just to be clear, the blue dragons are all lawful evil, right? Let's think of another way to think of lawful evil. Let's just say that they're narcissistic and selfish and manipulative, okay? Let's use those adjectives instead of lawful evil. When you're thinking about the blue dragon and its motivations and its ego and how all that stuff ties together, think about this. Think about the blue dragon as a sort of tempter or temptress, as a sort of nefarious plotter. Think about the blue dragon as a creature who might want to tempt your party into doing things that are not normally within their morality or their character. And this is a kind of sneaky DM move, right? But the reality is that as a DM, you also want to challenge your party to think like their character, to play in character, to role play who their character should be. And sometimes that means pushing the boundaries, pushing some buttons and testing them to see if they're going to consistently role play their character. And if they do, if they resist temptation, great, then reward them accordingly. But if they are tempted and they give in to temptation, maybe somehow this blue dragon figures out a way to get your party to become its allies and to become its minions. Maybe the temptation is treasure. Maybe it's some magical item. Maybe you have a whole storyline going on right now in your campaign where the party is looking for these important artifacts that are going to help them do some major thing in the overall storyline. Maybe the the blue dragon is the key to them acquiring one of these magical totems or artifacts or whatever it is, because the blue dragon has power, but there's a price. If the blue dragon acquires it for the party will have to render a service unto him later on. So a lot of ways to also think about this as more than just a fighter jet that's spitting out lightning. These are really smart, egotistical dragons who can become a really cool NPC or recurring kind of villain or possibly ally in your game. Especially if your party's like, hey, we're just going to make an evil party. Okay, well then flip the script. And now this blue dragon becomes like, their mob boss, and they are basically working for the blue dragon and hustling and raiding and doing whatever else. So I don't know. Those are just a few ideas. I really like the blue dragon. I think there's a lot of potential for it. And make sure if you have used blue dragons or encountered them in your own games as a DM or a player, share your stories in the comments below. As always, thank you guys so much, and thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon for your continued support. We'll see you next week.